Hello, welcome to the podcast. This is What a Scream, the podcast thing, whatever you call it, where I chat about horror films with a special guest every week. My name is Igraine. I think I usually say hi, my name's Miss Deli, but I think I'm going to start reverting back to my normal non-sparkly burlesque name. I just feel that I'm more of Igraine on this podcast than I am Oh Golly Miss Dolly. That's for anyone that doesn't know, that's my pin-up and burlesque name. But I think Igraine is a lot more horror-centric. So yes, sorry, my name is Igraine. I'm the host of What a Scream. I chat with guests every week about two particular horror films that are based around a particular subject or theme that I randomly pick out previous to recording. So this week, the subject that I picked out randomly is the one of home invasion. So this usually centers around killers, kidnappers, any of the above bad people breaking into a home, and kind of a game of cat and mouse ensues, usually when it comes to horror, with lots of gory outcomes. And yeah, we've got some great home invasion horrors, such as stuff like Don't Breathe. That's a really good one that kind of turned it all on its head. The Strangers is a great one. Il, which is kind of like the French version of The Strangers. So yeah, home invasions. They're fucking scary because it's something that could actually happen. And, you know, if you watch the news, it's something that is very, very believable. And I feel like that's what makes it such a scary subgenre. And I know one that a lot of people are pretty scared about, because your home, your house, it's meant to be your safe space. It's meant to be, when you close that door from the outside world, this is where you feel safe. This is where you can be vulnerable. And then when someone invades that space, you're like, shit, I'm not even safe in my own house. What the fuck am I going to do? So yes, home invasion is the subject for this podcast. My guest this week is the lovely Steph McKenna. They are a co-host of the podcast The Thirst, and they are also the editor of the Stephen King themed Outsider zine. Together we are chatting about two films that kind of have a home invasion in them, or centers around a home invasion, and that is Hush and also Haute Tension, or High Tension in English, or Switchblade Romance, it's also known as. So yes, this is my chat with Steph McKenna about home invasions. So I would like to welcome to What a Scream, Steph McKenna. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. I'm here I was going to say sunny Norwich. It's not sunny Norwich at all. It's been like, I don't know what's gone on today. We're flooded. It's awful, terrible weather. So yeah, good though. How are you?
I'm good. I am in overcast Ireland, and we did start off really sunny, and then it went really gross. Yeah.
Really, really bad. Terrible, terrible weather for July. It shouldn't be allowed.
I know. It's like we had really good weather last year when we were all in like severe lockdown, and now it's just like absolute crap. You know, the time we can actually get out and do things.
Right. Although I do feel like someone upstairs, downstairs, somewhere, someone last year was like, you know what, if we put bad weather on top of everything else, these people are going to go fully mental. So, yeah, I'm kind of glad it wasn't. If the weather was like this last year and we were trapped indoors the whole time, I think I would have gone like Jack Torrance and just fully bananas.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I completely agree with that. So were you watching lots of horror over the past year and a half?
Yeah, so much. It was almost like the first thing I did, actually, when we went into lockdown, the day we had to watch fucking Boris on TV, and it was like, holy hell, what am I going to do to get through the next I don't even know. First thing I did was text my friend, and we were like, we've been saying we want to watch all of True Blood. Should we just do that, like, from right now? As in tonight, we will start watching True Blood every single night until we get through all 7 seasons. And that, honestly, that coupled with watching horror films during the day and then True Blood before I went to bed, seriously got me through about 3 months of my life.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We started Walking Dead. And so, we went through all of that during our lockdown, and just shudder, more shudder horror movies. So many subscriptions. Yeah, I was just like, Shudder, BFI, here we go. Let's watch all those films that we said we never had a chance to watch. It's been a race, really. Absolutely. Like, I had a long list of horror films that I'd always like, right, I really need to watch. Like, Eraserhead was on there.
Yes, yeah.
And I was just like, okay, this is the time for me to get through my bucket list of horror.
Yeah, Eraserhead's not one of those films that you think like, oh, I've got like a Friday night in. Let's watch Eraserhead for fun. Okay.
Yeah. Invite over a few mates and be like, let's put on Eraserhead.
Great, good old laugh together, yeah.
Good old David Lynch.
Could you watch anything to do with like viruses or illnesses though? Because I did have to bypass that a bit. I was like, I can't watch any contagious, nothing COVID related for a little while.
See, I think myself and my husband really went into it in the deep end. We were like starting The Walking Dead. We watched that oh god, I can never remember, is it called Pandemic or something like that? It's got Matt Damon in it. Yeah. And it's basically the story of what we're living through now.
Yeah.
And that was the very first film we watched.
I love that. I feel like people had one or the other reactions. It was either fully lean into it or run away. But there is something about, I don't know. I mean, it's the same with horror across the board, isn't it? There's something about watching those things and experiencing those things as a way of coming to terms.
Absolutely.
With what's going on around you.
Yeah. So for anyone that doesn't know who you are, would you like to give us a little brief synopsis about who you are and what you do, etc.?
Yes, so I am the co-host of 2 podcasts. I host a pop culture podcast, tongue twister, with my friend April called The Thirst, and we mostly talk about music and film and TV, kind of things that have been going on recently, sort of reviews, and we also dissect some bigger topics. So we've done everything from kind of best teen high school movies to, debating sort of the idea of cancel culture and separating art from artists. And I also have definitely pulled in my own interests with regards to kind of Stephen King adaptations. We did a deep dive into Twin Peaks: The Return, sort of horror movies of the past 10 years. So I don't think April was a horror fan into that podcast, but I think I've probably converted her now.
Cool.
I also co-host a weekly podcast called The Writing Life, which interviews writers and translators from all walks of life all over the world, how they got into writing, approaches to their method and their craft, which is brilliant. And I'm also the editor of a new zine. It was a bit of a lockdown project called Outsider, which is a Stephen King zine which features writers and illustrators of marginalised genders, so women, non-binary folks and trans men. Yeah.
Great. And obviously you seem like a bit of a Stephen King stan. What got you into Stephen King?
Oh God, good question. I feel like I'm still a Stephen King fan in training because there are so many books, 70 something books. There's just so much to wade through. It's huge. But I think for me, his world building and the depth of his characters are just unrivaled. I just fully immersive, and I absolutely love that. And it's such a nice fan base to be a part of as well. Doing this zine has been it's just been such a nurturing process. And it came out wanting to hear some different opinions on Stephen King, like the good and the bad, whether you love his work, hate his work, think it should be applauded or critiqued, whatever it is. But I've just met some amazing people through it, and it's just such a lovely community of people, as are most horror communities, to be honest.
Yeah, I grew up reading Stephen King. Like my school boyfriend at the time, he was mad into Stephen King, and he'd always give me his books, and they were just so immersive. And then I went to university, and when you're forced to read so much, you stop
so
reading.
So true. Did you do an English degree?
I did an arts degree, so I did anthropology,
Oh wow,
and music technology. But it was very heavy on the theory and on the reading, and you just fall out of love with reading.
Yeah. Nothing will put you off more. I did, English lit, and I did a master's. And at one point I was reading, I needed to read about 4 books a week. And good Lord, did that put me off. I just couldn't read a page for months afterwards. Yeah. And then I just deliberately read loads of shit. Like just whatever I could get my hands on that looked terrible but fun. That's what I got into.
But it was Stephen King. Like my friend Kerry's a really avid reader, and she lent me books and was like, get back into reading. And it was Stephen King that brought me back into reading again.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So what do you think about his film adaptations then?
Oh, well, I think it's a funny one. Apparently, Stephen King is really difficult to adapt because there are so few. I personally would say, and some people might be angry with me for saying this, I think there are more bad adaptations than there are good adaptations.
Absolutely, yeah, really. I agree.
So many of them are quite questionable. And I think it probably is partly because of that sense of, we just, in the books, you are brought into that internal life of those characters. You know, you're brought into their thoughts, and we know them so personally, and that's so hard to bring out on the screen. And that sense of world building as well, so that, you know, you've got these huge groups of people. It's not just a character, it's like it's just a whole community, a whole town a lot of the time, and you're getting a sneak peek into everyone's lives. And I think that's very, very hard to press kind of visually. You spend so much time inside people's brains, so I think there are a few that I really like, but there aren't many great ones. Would you agree?
I do. I absolutely agree. I always hold out such hope for Stephen King adaptations. Like I'm like, come on, and
it's a great story. Come on, you can do it. And
no, I mean, just even the most recent example of Doctor Sleep, I hated the movie. Hated it.
Did you? Interesting. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I quite liked Doctor Sleep.
Really?
And I didn't like the book. Yes, and I think I went in with such low expectations.
Okay.
I was like, how can you... I didn't really like the book, and I thought, how could you possibly marry Kubrick and King? It's an impossible task. And I thought Flanagan did a pretty good job at attempting it, actually. So I quite liked it. But again, I felt very warm towards the characters within it. Yeah. But I do think that's a very Marmite film. Some people hate that film.
I think the thing with it is I didn't understand some of the plot points which they had changed. So like certain deaths or the ending. I don't understand why they changed it. Like, what was the point in changing it from the original?
The ending is the weak bit by far. I think the ending's the weakest bit by far for that film. It starts to fall apart when it leans too heavily into going back to the Overlook and kind of,
it really does.
As well. Yeah. Did you see Pet Sematary as well? The new Pet Sematary?
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
I don't mind it as a standalone film. If you were like, if you had no knowing that it was a Stephen King book and you were just like, this is just a scary film, like, it was fine. You know, I really like the first Pet Sematary, the original. I quite enjoyed that. I don't think it was as good as the original film, but it was all right for a standalone kind of.
Fine. Again, weak ending, but again, Stephen King's not known for his endings. That's a bit of a running joke too. Like, not great for endings. But did you like the It adaptations, like the It and It Chapter 2?
Again, controversial. Not really.
Not sure. Yeah.
I didn't like Pennywise. I thought it was too. I'm such like a cynic when it comes to CGI, but I'm really like it was just too CGI for me.
The better.
Exactly, and I just think you can't beat Tim Curry. So
I'm now trying to think of what a Stephen King adaptation is. That makes it sound like I hate Stephen King adaptations. It's not true. There are good ones out there. But I think, oh God, panicking. Can't think of any. It just seems to be a very difficult storyteller to adapt for screen. So
absolutely,
holding out the hope. Someone somewhere is going to do a good new Stephen King adaptation.
Fingers crossed. So was it reading and kind of horror literature that got you into the horror genre, or was it horror movies first?
It was books first. Books were my first love, and I was the weird little kid, like many of us, that was obsessed with Goosebumps and point horror and going to the library and borrowing them all. And it was books first and foremost. And I've got this funny memory of being really little and wanting to watch horror films that my parents were watching, and I would ask if I could stay and watch them, and they'd be like, fine, you're not going to like this. And then immediately, as soon as it was starting to get suspenseful or stressful, and honestly, I was about 5, I'd be like, I've just remembered I've got some housework to do. And I'd go behind the sofa and be like, I'm just going to do some tidying from behind here, but I am watching. And I'd just hang out behind the sofa and be like, no, I'm still here though, but I've just got some ironing to do behind here, Mum. I'm just going to stay. That's all I remember, is being so intrigued by horror films and being like, I really want to be around this, but I'm also more like terrified and can't handle it. So books first, then films. And I remember not being allowed to watch Tim Burton films actually when I was younger. It was, my mum was like, we'll wait and see, like maybe when you're a little bit older, but somehow managed to get Hocus Pocus through the door without them noticing. So
good old satanic witches there.
Loved Hocus Pocus. I think Zachary Binks was like my first crush,
of course,
but not as the cat, as the human. Obviously.
You'd hope so.
Just felt the need to clarify that. And then as a teenager, I just did you record films off television? I would always be recording like slasher films off TV, kind of like Urban Legend, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I remember doing it with The Sixth Sense when I was a little bit older, probably about 12 or something as well. Record them on VHS and then watch them religiously when my parents weren't around.
I had The Lost Boys. Because MTV were doing like classic 80 movies kind of season. And so I recorded it off of MTV, and I was devastated when my dad like taped over it with some football match or cricket match. It was something like that, and it was like, I'm going to kill you.
So important. I loved having those VHS collections. That's something that young people don't get the excitement of having nowadays, is recording stuff off TV. And then like rewinding through all the adverts. Recording music videos off TV as well, having to wait for your favourite music video to come up. I'd be like, yes, finally it's on, quick, hit record.
This is really sad, but I had a whole VHS dedicated to Good Charlotte, and it was...
Same, mate, same! Huge Good Charlotte fan.
So it wasn't just me. I'd record all their music videos, all their interviews they did, everything on this precious VHS.
Benji Madden, my prince.
Forever and always.
It was the Liberty Spikes so much. Well, I can't believe I admitted that on a podcast, but that's
For me, it was the cheetah print.
Yes, the pink cheetah print. Damn.
I miss Good Charlotte. I miss the good old days of Good Charlotte.
Right? The things he did with hair dye, it's amazing. I'm so glad I found a fellow Good Charlotte fan.
We should start a podcast. It should be like Good Charlotte.
Can we?
Good Charlotte podcast.
A deep dive into Good Charlotte songs. I could do that
forever. So back to the subject of horror before we get to...
So sorry.
I'm excited. Do you remember what your very first horror film was?
That is such a tough question. I think, I remember things like Hocus Pocus as a young kid, and for me at the time that was like a horror film. And I have a very distinctive memory of being probably, it would have been pre-teen, and I went to my cousin's house, and my cousin was like older cousin with all the horror films and the great collection of stuff, and I stayed up and watched Scream for the first time, and the opening sequence hanging from a tree was just seared into my memory. Like I was deeply traumatized, impressed, but also just couldn't sleep for days afterwards. So very distinct memory of Scream.
So let's move on to our theme of the week, which I picked out home invasion. So how do you feel about the home invasion subgenre of horror?
Do you know what? I was really pleasantly surprised when this came up, because the time I thought, I haven't given much thought to home invasion films as a concept, but coincidentally, I've talked about and watched a few home invasion films recently. So I rewatched The Strangers a couple of weeks ago. With
feels like a couple of years.
It does. It felt like a long time ago. We rewatched that a couple of weeks ago, and I was discussing Hush in the context of A Quiet Place on our podcast last week. And yeah, so there've been a couple of films recently that I've watched that have been home invasion films, and I think I love the concept of home invasion films actually, because they tap into such a very personal place, don't they? They are possible, they are real. This isn't vampires or ghosts, or this is something that can happen to you randomly at any time, like Manson murders, Golden State Killer. Like, this is a very real possibility, and it's a very personal invasion of the place where you should feel safest and where you should be able to keep the rest of society out, and that is really fucked up.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that makes home invasions scarier?
I do. So scary, really terrifying. I can remember watching The Strangers for the first time at university by myself when I was home alone. God knows why.
No, don't do that.
And you're just being petrified, because it's so possible, and everything every creak in your house could be something, because you're experiencing it. It's just the reality of it for me is terrifying. Do you feel the same?
I don't know. As a teenager, yeah, because, when I was left to babysit my little sister, we lived out in the middle of nowhere. It was just farmland. Yeah. And I remember one night, I can't remember what I'd watched, but I think it was some home invasion. And I heard creaking outside, which isn't that unusual in like the country. There's always weird noises going on. And I was so petrified that I got like the biggest knife I could find out of the kitchen and like sat it next to me. Sat it next to me on the sofa and was like, for some reason I was like, it's going to be like one of the farmers from around here is going to end up like.
Speared on the end of your kitchen knife. Yeah.
So, but growing up, for some reason, they don't affect me all that much anymore. I'm just kind of like, meh. I'm a bit meh about the whole subgenre. So what kind of came up for me while I was like going through a lot of home invasions was, you've got home invasions like the Panic Room, or Panic Room, whatever it's called. And then we've got home invasions like The Strangers. But whereas Panic Room's a bit more thriller, but The Strangers is thought of more as a horror. So where do you think is that dividing line?
That's such a good question, because this is one of the big question marks that was coming up for me as quite a few of the films I was thinking of. I was like, I guess they are kind of horror, they are kind of thriller, and a lot of them feel like a slasher film as well. I was like, where's the line between home invasion and slasher? Because most of the examples I could think of could arguably be a slasher too. Yeah. And I guess I don't know what the line is. I mean, for me, horror is quite a broad genre anyway, in that anything that can be horrifying to an extent can be partly a horror film. Yeah. And I do feel like one of the films I picked for this conversation is, that's definitely a blurred line between thriller and horror. And I'm not sure what the difference is, unless it's something very obvious, like a supernatural entity trying to invade your house. Then it feels a lot more obviously like horror. But if it's a human being invading the house and trying to get to you, is it more of a thriller? They feel quite blended to me in a lot of these films. And as I said before, the slasher element as well. A lot of the films I'm like, is home invasion maybe a subgenre of slasher? Where do all these things fit? I don't know. I found it quite hard to interrogate, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. Someone asked me during the week, do I think Cape Fear is a horror?
Oh, yeah. Cape Fear is a great example.
And I was like, you know what? As shitty as this answer is, it just depends on your own opinion. Because,
it does.
like, you could look at a film like Seven or Silence of the Lambs and be like, well, they're not horror, they're thrillers, or they're a psychological.
Yeah.
But then if someone asked me, is Basic Instinct a horror film, I'd be like, no, it's a thriller. But it's basically the same thing. It's about like a killer.
Yeah. I guess it depends how bothered you are by those definitions, because I think I'm not. Like I see so many of these things as quite fluid. And I could read so many films as horror to a degree that I don't really mind. And the more I was thinking about what even is a home invasion film, I mean, as you mentioned, there are obvious, Panic Rooms is an invasion film. And I was thinking, like, Night of the Living Dead is kind of like a home invasion film, because there's zombies trying to get in. And there's an invasion into your body as well, like your personal space. And I was like, maybe Rosemary's Baby is a home invasion film, because again, these people are trying to come into your personal space. Absolutely. It's an invasion of body and home. And then I was just going deeper and deeper and thinking, Strangers, obviously, sort of fairly tropey home invasion horror. Then I was thinking, did you see Brian Bettino's latest film, The Dark and the Wicked? I was like, that's kind of like a home invasion as well, because it's like the devil at your doorstep trying to get in. And the more I go, the more I think about it, I was like, so many things could be partly a home invasion film.
You're absolutely right. And you could do such a deep dive on it and like write such articles on, the film theory of a home invasion and what it actually signifies.
Yeah, what it signifies. And it can signify so many things. But I feel like at its most basic, it is that sense of the outside or the public coming into your personal safe space, whether that's your home or your community or your body. It is that outside coming in a way that you don't want and you haven't asked for, I guess, for me, is at the root of it.
Yeah, that's very well put.
Thanks so much.
Would you like to introduce your film and give us a short synopsis about it?
Yes. So it took me about 30 seconds to choose this film, because I had been talking to someone else about it earlier in the week and saying I really must rewatch this. So I chose Hush, which is a film by Mike Flanagan, who we've already discussed. Yes. And so the premise of Hush is that we meet Maddie, and she is a deaf-mute writer, and she's living by herself in the woods. She's got her cat for company, and she has a very close relationship with her friends and family, but she feels very isolated because she's lost her ability to speak and hear as a teenager. So she's living a cut-off life, a very different life from those around her. And she's also a writer, which I think can be quite a solitary profession. So that sort of cuts her off a bit as well. And she's been cut off in a way that isn't her fault, but she's also choosing to take herself away from the rest of the world and society. And she's created this safe space for herself in her house in the middle of the woods. It's a really rural location. And she's writing this novel. And then one evening, a masked killer appears at her window and discovers that she can't hear or speak to them, and this killer decides to play a game with her and torture her with the ultimate goal of murdering her. So she must use every resource she has, two of which are not, she can't scream and she can't hear what this person is doing, but she has to really keep her wits about her and use every resource she has to fight him.
That's a really good synopsis.
Thanks so much.
So you obviously like Hush. What is it about Hush that you like?
I like this film because it's home invasion at its simplest. It is literally set up in one location with one protagonist facing off against one killer. There are a lot of sort of what I would think of as kind of home invasion tropes, but at the same time, there are no big plot twists. It plays in a quite straightforward way, but it sets up some of these conventions of this type of film, but then plays with those conventions and some of your kind of expectations as an audience of what a film like this should be. So having a heroine who is deaf mute really opens up possibilities in terms of sort of the way tension and fear is created, because we're so reliant on sound in horror films, aren't we? We're quite for those jump scares, a lot of the time you're really reliant on the score and the sound kind of really hitting there and making you jump, and that's pretty much stripped away from this film. It's far more reliant on visual storytelling, and there aren't really any jump scares, and as I said, there are no big plot twists, so it kind of, I think it takes some of those conventions, twists some of them around, but I also quite like that it's quite simple and quite simply executed. Had you seen this film before?
I had,
when I suggested it?
Yeah, I'd seen it before, and I'm going to make a slight confession. Both times, so when I'd seen it before and my rewatch, for some reason I'm sitting there and I'm watching it and I black out for like most of the film, and then it ends and I'm like, I just can't, for some reason my brain cannot, whether it's to do with this, whether it's to do with the sound. I think because I'm such like I'm really into music, I'm really into like, I've studied sound, I've studied music technology, I'm really into that. And so sometimes when films don't have much of a soundtrack, I really like it because it kind of adds to it, and you're like, but for some reason the use of that in this film just makes me turn off. It's so weird.
Maybe that is your, as you say, like you're so, I don't know, not dependent sounds like the wrong word, but sound is so integral to that experience for you. I think that's really, I think that's fascinating, actually. It's kind of interesting.
Because the first time I watched it, I was like, you know what, maybe I was just tired and blah, 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 blah. But this time I actually sat down with a view to watch it, didn't have any other, and it still happened. It still
can't remember what happens. That's so interesting to me. And I really enjoy this film, and maybe enjoy it for some of the elements that you're not so keen on.
I think it's strange. I think like sound for me, have you seen Ben Wheatley's In the Earth yet?
Yes.
Right, so sound in that was like
hugely oppressive.
And I found it absolutely amazing because it got my attention, and from the sound I could pay attention. You know, like it's such a weird thing to try and explain, but
it's pulling you in, that soundtrack. So you must be very very sort of receptive to a lot of horror films and what is going on with the sound in them. That's really interesting, because it's, with this film, it's obviously a very deliberate decision to strip away the sound, and they haven't, I don't think they've stripped away the sound entirely, so there is an undercurrent of, we do occasionally hear from Maddie's point of view, and it isn't stony silence. I think they use some strange background noises to kind of layer and imply silence, basically, because I don't know, it'd probably be terrible if there was no sound whatsoever, but really interesting that didn't sit as well with you, and you couldn't kind of focus in the same way.
I read like Mike Flanagan, he'd like concentrated a lot on the sound, and like you said, he didn't want it completely silent, so what he used was the sound of ultrasound machines. So he used that, and also so they try to do a lot of like using the noise within the filming. But he said that it sounded like a herd of elephants or something, so they were like, we can't use this. Like, so all they did was
imagine like loads of crews trying to like tiptoe around a house and be like, shh, don't be making any noise.
Everyone's wearing like cotton wool slippers.
Like a mouse.
And then they overdubbed her breathing as well.
Oh, okay,
So I understand that it was a very deliberate thing with the sound, but for some reason
didn't work for you though. That's really interesting.
I know, it's a bit weird.
No, I like that though. I really like that. How do you feel about it as a home invasion film? Like, how much of it do you remember? Do you remember much of it?
Like what I remember, see, I have such a double-edged thing about this. I like the premise, and that it's not just like there's a woman at home alone and someone's breaking in, blah blah blah. I like that it had that slight kind of what would happen if you were sensory kind of deprived because of one reason or the other. I like the fact that there was really no explanation for why the killer was. I like that. I like that when people are just senselessly evil.
Me too, actually. It was one of the things I picked up on, is that he takes his time. He's not in a rush at all. We've got no fucking clue why he's there or why he's doing this. It seems like it's just because he finds it fun. And it's kind of, is it in The Strangers where they say like, why did you do this? And it's like, because you were home. It's like, if there's no reason behind it, I personally find that really frightening. Like there's no motive. It's just evil. And also the killer, so he's got this mask at the beginning, hasn't he? And it's like a Mike Myers style mask.
It is,
isn't it? It's quite blank and expressionless. It's got like a bit of a smirk, but there's not much going on there. But he takes that off really early into the film. And Maddie asks, says, I haven't seen your face, so, I won't tell anyone. And he takes that off to make a point that like, you're not coming out of this alive because you've seen me now. And I quite liked that as well, because you wouldn't often see someone remove their mask. Yeah. And he's also just such a plain looking dude. Like,
I know,
be anyone off the street. He's not, strange, horribly disfigured, like, I'm evil. He just looks like a random dude. And it's like, why are you doing this? Yeah.
And I kind of like the way that's, if you look back at all the true crime and the serial killers, and they literally all look like normal people.
They do. They blend in, and they often have other lives, don't they? They have families and partners and jobs, and they blend in, and yet they are capable of doing things that are just so evil, and it almost feels like there's just no reason behind it.
So I really liked that aspect of it. One thing that I was chatting to my husband about this, and what's your point of view on this? I'd like to ask you, how do you feel about Katie Siegel? She plays Maddie. Now, she is not deaf. She can hear. How do you feel about non-deaf people playing deaf people, in the same vein that like a non-disabled person may play a disabled person? How do you feel about that?
This was my big point of contention, and one of my big about this film is that I can kind of appreciate that this was a film made on an incredibly small budget. It was like 1 million or so. It's basically like a quarter of what they had for even Get Out. Like, it's a tiny film, and it's a husband and wife duo. I know they plotted and wrote the whole thing together, so it feels quite homegrown in that respect. So I understand that there may have been restrictions there, but I mean, I just feel I don't need to see. I don't know. It feels very unnecessary, and it feels like that could have been a role that was given to a disabled person. And we've had so many great films out actually in recent years that have focused on hearing impairment specifically, and have worked with actors who are hearing impaired. And this film's not even that old, is it? But I feel like in 2021 there wouldn't be a reasonable excuse at all.
Absolutely.
To not use someone. So that's not a very good answer, is it? But I was hyper aware of that watching it, and I even Googled to see if I thought maybe I'm just assuming that Kate Siegel doesn't have, maybe she does have a hearing impairment, or I'm just making an assumption here. I don't think she does, and I think this is a great idea, and it is a good idea for a horror film. Let's work as a team together on this. But going forward, those roles should just be occupied by people who are disabled, because there are no shortage of disabled people who are fantastic actors who could be playing those parts. We don't need to be acting on behalf of other people.
No, I think you said it perfectly. And also, how can you write a role for a deaf person if you don't? I mean, maybe they did,
speak to some
but I just feel that it's you're writing an experience of someone else's life, and it's like, but there's so many wonderful actors, as you said, that live that life and are brilliant actors and can do the role justice. And I just it always makes me kind of go when a film does that.
Absolutely. I don't, and I think we're more, I mean, the positive is that I think now we are even more hyper aware of this, and I hope that I think people would get called out more nowadays for having a disabled character and hiring someone who isn't disabled for that role. It's interesting because with my writer brain on, there's always a similar debate with writers in that you know, do you just write characters from your point of view, or you know, are you as a writer, do you have the right as a writer to work from other perspectives and to have characters that are not like you? That feels, obviously that's very different because you are one person inhabiting all of these characters. So it is different to film. I feel like it's a bit more, it can be way more cut and dry in film in that you are working with all of these people. You don't need to be inhabiting the roles that other people can play. But I always think it's a really strange debate with writing and books. Like, should you always write characters that share a similar perspective and life experience to you, or do you have the right to write about experiences that you haven't had? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely
food for thought.
A subject that can be debated for goodness knows, because I'm sure everyone's got a different opinion on it. And actually, just very quickly, that's something I've always thought about Stephen King. Is I sometimes think, especially with the earlier books, I was like, you know, Stephen King doesn't write many. I mean, there are some very obvious examples of strong female characters in his books, but he doesn't have that many strong female characters. Some of them feel quite flawed, and then you think, do I need Stephen King to write me lots of female characters, or shall I just go and read more women writers, which is what I do anyway? Like, I kind of I flip-flop between going like, he really needs to get these female characters, like he needs to lock these down a bit better. And then I think, why is he doing? I don't think he's equipped for that job at all. One author that I actually really appreciate for the female characters he puts in is Grady Hendricks. I don't know how you feel about, but I quite like his female kind of characters that he presents. I really like Grady Hendricks. I was wondering, because I think pretty much all his books so far have had like a female lead character. They have from a female perspective. Which apart from Satan Loves You, which says, although there's like the two characters of Satan and the nun that he writes
I haven't read that book, but but I always wanted to ask him about that, actually, and how that's kind of come to. But I think you're right, like my best friend's exorcism.
That's great. I love that book.
That's a fantastic book. Such a great book, and the friendship between the two girls in that book is just brilliant.
I'm really looking forward to reading his The Final Girls Club.
Anything with final girls, that just sounds like it's written for us.
And the narrator is the final girl from Friday the 13th, and
that's very cool.
I think it's just going to be so interesting to read. I'm so excited. Anyway, back to home invasions.
Sorry, went on a
so would you recommend Hush to horror fans?
Do you know what? I would. I personally like it, and I think it does do some interesting things, and I like the way it plays with kind of, as I mentioned, like audience expectations. Like, you as the audience, as the viewer, you're actually privy to far more than Maddie, you know, understands or knows. And I like the fact that she's kind of a final girl, and she's compelling because she's so resourceful because of her, you know, she's not held back by her disability. She's actually incredibly methodical, really resourceful. As I say, she uses you know, her other senses, they're stronger, and she's using some of the mechanisms she has, like the smoke alarm and things, to her advantage. And I really like that. I like her as a character. I thought, I think she's very interesting. So I think it's worth a watch, and also it's only about an hour 20. So it's like, just watch it, see how you go with it. I think there are things it does that are very interesting, even if it isn't always entirely successful, personally. But it sounds like you're probably not going to watch it again.
No, I probably won't watch it again. Maybe I might give it like third time lucky.
Just fall asleep straight away. Like,
oh no.
Maybe that can be the film that helps you like fall asleep when you're. It's like the Calm app. Just I'll put Hush on.
I'd recommend it again. Just, you know, it takes perhaps like the slasher or the home invasion and has another added thing to it. You know, it's not just a straightforward kind of like Don't Speak. Is that what it's called? Yes, Don't Speak. You know, perhaps if you had them two, it's like a double. Don't talk.
Don't breathe. Don't breathe. Don't breathe.
That was it. Breathe. It was one of them.
Don't Speak. Great song. Don't Speak. Yes, you're right. Though that twists it again, doesn't it? Because it's a home invasion, but it's flipped, and you've got the invaders into the home are the ones that end up being hunted. That is the right film, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And the guy of the house, he's blind.
Yes,
so he
is blind. It's like a
so we've got this like
or something.
Yeah. Right? So we've got this sensory thing again. So yeah, I think I would recommend it unless you're like me.
I think that's fair. Are you a fan of, do you like Mike Flanagan's films generally? Are they all his TV? Like, did you like Haunting of Hill House or anything like that?
I didn't mind Haunting of Hill House. I thought the cinematography was amazing in it. I did love the storyline. But he's not, this makes me sound like such a bitch. He's not really on my radar.
Go on, say it.
He's not really on my radar as a director. If someone says Mike Flanagan, I go, who?
Yeah, fair.
You know, and I know that sounds really terrible, but yeah, he's just not, like, he did Oculus a while ago, wasn't it? I remember because I was such a Doctor Who fan at the time, and obviously Amy Pons, not her real name, but that's all I can remember her as.
I can't remember her real name.
She was in it. It was like her first big Hollywood film since being in Doctor Who, and I watched that and I remember just being a bit disappointed by it. And then I wasn't a big fan of it. So yeah, he's not really on my radar, unfortunately. What about you?
I've got a real soft spot for Mike Flanagan, and I think it is I think he really tries to do right by characters. I think he really tries to flesh out characters in these films and give them a real heart, and make them people that you care about and that you want to root for. And I really like that, because that doesn't always happen, and that's often overlooked. I don't think he always gets it right. And I wouldn't say he's, you know, I don't know, he's not always doing something very different. So I think I always feel like I want to give what he does a chance. Like, I'm always interested when something comes out that he's done. I feel like I'm going to at least care about the people who are involved with it and have a good time with the characters. Not always keen on his endings, but yes.
That's fair. Yeah. So the next film that I chose was Haute Tension, aka Haute Tension, or Switchblade Romance.
So many names.
I know, right?
I googled it and was like, what's going on? Which film is it?
And the thing is, there's not even a switchblade in it. Where was the switchblade?
What romance is this? Where is it? No.
Like, I thought it was like a My Chemical Romance song. I was like...
Right? They should have had that on the soundtrack, actually. That would have been great.
So it's a 2003 French slasher home invasion directed by Alexandre Aja, starring Cécile de France, May Wen, and Philippe Nahan. That's probably not how you pronounce Nahan, but I'm doing it the Irish way, where I'm like, it's Nahan.
I thought it was beautiful. I was going to compliment you on your pronunciation.
Thank you.
Lovely French.
Thank you. 10 years of French class. So High Tension is part of kind of like the new wave of French extremity. It's very famous for actually being one of the forerunners of French extremity. Are you a fan of French extremity films?
I've got no relationship to French extremity films whatsoever. It's like a total, and it's one of those things. It's just like a bit of a blind spot for me in terms of. I feel like I don't watch a lot of extremely violent films.
Okay.
Like I don't know. I just don't. And it's kind of, I feel like we're kind of the opposite, but in a really interesting, cool, complementary way. But yeah, I'm not great on that kind of thing. I think this is probably the only film within that kind of collective that I have now seen.
Yeah.
I've heard of others. I know, I've heard of others, but like I know about like Trouble Every Day. Is it Trouble Every Day? It is Trouble Every Day, I think. So, but yeah, personally, it's not something that I would have watched I hadn't seen it before. So when you mentioned it, I was like, cool, this means that I have to watch something that I wouldn't ordinarily pick.
Yeah.
But I don't watch a lot of extremely violent films. I'm not good with anything that feels like a bit of an endurance test.
Okay.
But yeah, what about you? Are you
it's only within the past year that I have started.
Cool.
So like French extremity and extreme horror has always been that kind of thing that I'd heard about, but it all seemed a bit taboo and a bit like I don't know if I could handle it. Because first time I watched Hostel, I couldn't sit through it. It got to like the Achilles tendons bit and I was just like, bye. But it's within the past year that from listening, especially to Zobo with the Shotguns podcast, that I'm like, okay, I'll check it out. And I'd actually seen more extreme horror than I'd thought I had.
brilliant.
Yeah, so I watched Martyrs this year.
I haven't seen it. I don't plan on it.
Really?
But
I didn't think it was as bad as everyone made it out to be. But
interesting.
Yeah, like I think maybe my tolerance level has gone up a lot. And I think that's maybe from being a mother and going through birth and pregnancy that I'm like, oh, I've done all of that horrible shit. Like,
what kind of violence? Violence inflicted on bodies. Like you've kind of been there.
Exactly. And like when you're dealing with a shitty 3-year-old every day, like that's horror. Okay. Like,
yeah, you are a courageous person. Mums are very courageous. You've got a good point there.
All parents are like, yeah.
Very true.
I'm like, people are like, oh, The Exorcist, the scary film. I'm like, no, that is basically my kid after a birthday party. Like, spewing up the walls and climbing them and
it's turning around.
Yeah. It's fine.
Soup everywhere.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just newly getting into French extremity. Do I think that there's much of a point to it?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is like people hear things about it and it's all built up and
I love that idea actually. I love like almost like the mythology around it, being like, have you seen this? Can you can you dare to watch this? Oh yeah, I've seen that. And it is that kind of endurance test, isn't it? I think I'm kind of with you in that. And I'm sure there are there is so much to interrogate about these films, especially I think as a woman, like I think there is a lot that could be interrogated about these films. If it's but some of them, as you say, if it feels quite, I don't want to use the word superficial. I don't mean that. I just mean quite, I don't know. I'm not sure why it's happening.
Yes.
What the reason is. Why is this happening? Or is it just something that I can appreciate in terms of effects and something fun to watch with others? I don't know. I haven't quite tapped into that personally yet.
Same. I think I'm still ignorant on, obviously, when we go through like kind of fashions of horror, it's always born out of a culture or something.
Always.
Yeah. So I think I'm still ignorant out of what French extremity is born from.
Yeah.
And I'd obviously have to look into that a bit. Because, I'm kind of like you. I'm still kind of like, I don't get it. I don't know why.
Yeah. It's always so interesting, isn't it, with horror to see, what societal fears, basically, or what is going on in society that we are, this is coming out at this time. And I do believe these things are made and come out and are talked about for a reason. And it's fascinating, as you say, when you kind of dig down into that and look at the way it reflects the world we live in and the things we've been through. So as you say, I too I want to hear someone in a nutshell tell me about that. Actually, I think we should
absolutely, we need to get on that.
Maybe Zobo can probably would be the best setting for that, but I bet it's absolutely fascinating when you get into it actually.
Absolutely. Yes,
I'm not quite there yet either.
No. So High Tension, it follows the story of Marie and Alex, who are best friends, and they are going to Alex's parents in the country. And halfway through the night, someone knocks on the door. The dad goes to answer it, and it is a serial killer. And all hell breaks loose, and the killer obviously goes on a rampage. And Marie hides, and she is the one that kind of witnesses everything, and she is trying to get to Alex, who has been captured by the serial killer. And then it moves from out of the home into more of an outdoors kind of setting. So what did you think of High Tension? Did you like it?
I found it so interesting because, and for me, it did. I watched Hush the first night, and the second night I watched this, and this is my first viewing of this film, and I didn't know much. I deliberately didn't read about it beforehand, and it was such a contrast because everything about this film feels like it is designed to kind of terrify and repulse you. So they're so, in my mind, quite stark opposites, and this feel like it really embraced a lot of the home invasion slasher kind of genre tropes, and it was a real kind of homage to some of those like 80s video nasty films like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I felt like a large part of this film, it really leans into and kind of celebrates that stuff, and it has a lot of those kind of cliches, as you were saying, even having Marie kind of bearing witness to all these murders and kind of, you know, hiding under the bed, hiding in the cupboard, kind of it just felt like it was really leaning into that stuff in a kind of in a way that you could tell they found enjoyable and fun. But it's definitely a film that is designed to be a bit of a sharp, nasty shock. So I can't say I found it enjoyable.
Okay.
As in, like, I wasn't like, this is fun, you know, because I don't think it's designed really to be, hey, what a laugh. Well, just sitting by myself, laughing at the screen. No, but when I say it's not enjoyable, it's not that I didn't like it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's just, I figured that, you know, it's not designed for me to enjoy is just a strange word for it.
No, I get it, because when you look at like the 80s horrors like Friday the 13th, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street, they are enjoyable slashers. They're you know, you can sit around with your mates and watch them and laugh, and you know,
they are fun. There's a fun element to them.
Whereas a slasher or a home invasion like High Tension, I just couldn't imagine watching it with my friends. It's like, I have to watch this by myself because it's quite,
and you know I watched it by myself, and I'm kind of glad I did. Like, my partner wasn't in, and I was like, actually, I'm glad I did this by myself and focused on it, and just kind of, it makes a really interesting contrast to Hush as well, because the noise, this use of sound. So from I think in Hush, like, the production credits at the beginning are completely silent. With this film, it is like noise, abrasion, tension through music from the very beginning. So, and watching this, even it kind of changed my viewing experience, because I was really tuned into even like the sound of the wildlife at night in this rural location was really loud, like the insects and the birds and the wind was like, wow, this is a really noisy film. The sound design is really effective, and it adds to the real oppressiveness of this film. Like, it makes you feel very claustrophobic, I would say.
But there's not a lot of dialogue in the film. Did you notice that? There's very, very little dialogue. A little bit with Marie and Alex at the beginning, and when they're in the parents' house. But other than that, there's very, very little dialogue. Did you feel that kind of added to this kind of suspense of it, and this feeling of like claustrophobia, but almost isolation at the same time?
Oh yeah, you felt incredibly cut off, like just and as I said, like, it makes you, the lack of dialogue makes you hyper aware of the other sounds in the film, and this poor girl who was having to be as silent as she can to get through the night, and there is as you say, she's isolated. There is no one there for her to talk to or get help from. It's a horrible feeling. It's a really horrible feeling. How did you feel watching this? Did it make you feel kind of, I don't know, I felt quite heavy and claustrophobic. Like, it wasn't just, I mean, the characters were sometimes, Marie was sometimes crammed into some tiny spaces hiding. It was like, even when she got out and was like in a bigger space, I felt kind of enclosed.
I mean, it was very much like she had to stay hidden. And I guess that is a wider commentary. And obviously this is a queer horror film. And obviously, I feel like that's a bit of a commentary on being a queer woman, a lesbian, and feeling like, you know, you're possibly in love with your best friend, and you're going to her family's house, and you can only pretend to be friends, and you can't be who you want to be. And I kind of felt that was an extension of that.
You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Marie was a character of quite few words even at the beginning, wasn't she? Alex was kind of asking about, you know, like, when are you going to get a boyfriend? When are you going to hook up with someone? And she cut that off, like she just diverted the conversation and didn't a person of few words, because she doesn't know what to say or how to say it, and she can't say it. And you're very right, it ties in, doesn't it, with that entire
I mean, even from the get-go, there's such a sadness to Marie.
Yeah, there is.
You know, before you even get to the twist, which we will talk about, she's such a sad character, and she's got this melancholy about her, and you get it from the very get-go. You're just like, oh,
you do.
Yeah,
you do. And you kind of wonder, like, because she's going to stay with Alex and her family, and you don't really know what her family background is, or, you know, why she's going to stay with them. I mean, it could just be a fun road trip, or you just don't know anything about her personal life, really. I don't think we hear anything in the same way. We get sort of embraced into this Alex's family and her, you know, her brother and her lovely parents, and kind of Marie feels very kind of set apart from that. And you can tell that she's not quite sure how to, she feels quite awkward. That she doesn't know how to interact with everyone there.
So what did you think of the gore in this? And boy, is it gory from the get-go. You're like, what the actual living fuck is going on?
It absolutely does not. The bit when we're first introduced to the killer, when he rolls up in that nasty car and is masturbating with a head. I was like, chuck that out. Holy shit. This is setting the bar quite high. It is a film that does not look away. You are watching the violence. You can look away if you want, but it is there on the screen. It is uncompromising.
Absolutely.
You know when it is a violent film, when they kill the dog and the child.
Oh my god, right? Like, the two things you do not do in film is, like,
do that,
kill dogs or kill a child, and it does it both with unflinching confidence.
And again, in Hush, there is a cat in Hush, and they kind of toy with the idea of, like, the cats, because the killer's stroking the cat, and you think, it's gonna fucking kill the cat, and of course the cat lives, the cat's fine. And then you watch this, and it's like, this guy kills a St. Bernard, like, this is a massive dog, and this guy has murdered it. Like, what a contrast.
I really liked the gore because it was done by the guy who G. Annetto De Rossi, who worked a lot with, was it Fulci he worked a lot with?
Lucio Fulci.
And you can tell that it's just, like, done by a master. Because it's so real and it's so visceral that it's just like, you can tell he had fun with it. As gross as that is.
I mean, that is the one thing I will say about violent films, is that they look incredibly fun to put together for the most part. Like the scene near the end with the chainsaw through the car, good fucking god. And it just keeps on going on. It's like, how is there so much guts and blood in this one man? It just keeps going. It's absolutely uncompromising. And of course it brings in sex as well. There's violence and sex. Like, sex is quite a heavy presence in this film too. They're very intertwined. You've got that bit at the beginning when the killer arrives, and it's contrasted with Marie masturbating in the house. Like, it's got that close relationship between sex and violence down, which feels very typical of lots of horror films.
So this film was heavily censored for American audiences, as in all of that gore was cut, taken out.
What else happened in the film?
Right? You're like,
what are you doing?
Well, that didn't leave a lot.
Just like so she just walks around, and she's basically hiding under a bed for a while, and then she goes to, like, the Shell petrol station, and that's it. Okay.
So obviously a lot of us horror fans have a lot to say about censorship, but do you feel that censorship kind of takes away the integrity of a film?
I'm a firm believer in I don't believe in censorship. I just across film, across literature, across pretty much any kind of art, like, where I think you can absolutely you know, believe something is good or bad or right or wrong, and you can have that opinion. But once, I don't think it should be censored. It does take away from absolutely takes away from the integrity of something. And you know, the decisions around who gets to censor what are so, you know, they're you know, this film has been censored because of the violence, but that I don't know who gets to make those decisions and who gets to choose what is what we're allowed to watch, what we're allowed to see as a mainstream audience, and what we're not allowed to see. Like we start picking and choosing. That's just, I don't agree with that. And there are things out there that I think aren't good or shouldn't be made, or are, you know, I've seen films that I mean, I can't think of what they are, but I'm sure I've seen films that I've thought like, that is distasteful, I do not like that film. But I don't know who gets to decide who gets to censor things and what is allowed and what isn't. I don't like anything like that. How about you?
Obviously I think it's a lot of like film fans, especially. I always feel like people that decide on censorship aren't actually film fans. They're just like these pearl clutching people, you know. But it's just
I mean, as you say, that there's, you know, there is subtext to this film as well, like you know, the queer subtext to this film. You're censoring this film, and that is shifting that has an impact and a knock-on effect of an entire other narrative, doesn't it? It's
and you know what, people will get a hold of the uncut version anyway, so it doesn't matter.
You just make it more tempting by doing that. That's
exactly.
like slapping a parental advisory sticker on a CD, isn't it? But I bet people like who are born post 1999 don't even know what a parental advisory sticker is. But you slap something like that on it, you just want to buy it more and listen to it more.
Exactly, yeah. So a big thing in this film is obviously the twist. So the big twist is we find out that the serial killer never existed and that it was in fact all Marie.
Marie, what are you doing?
You daft bitch. How did you feel about twist?
I mean, I love a twist, but I'm not sure this one worked for me personally. It felt a little bit weird because it did feel like, as I said, it was sort of a straightforward kind of homage celebration of lots of different types of horror film before it, and it was doing something in quite straightforward but quite a, as you say, kind of a fun way, I guess. And then it's sort of shoehorned, it became something else entirely different at the end, and I'm just not sure it made sense. And I guess with those sorts of films, with the benefit of hindsight, you're able to go back and say like, okay, that's why she did this and made this decision and this happened. But I don't know, I found it obviously going back, you could look at what I found was Marie is this kind of quite savvy, intelligent, courageous person, but she does make some strange decisions because she doesn't attempt to flee. She does, you know, she sticks around. It's like you've literally got like an open goal there. Run away, like run away and get help. And she doesn't ever do it. And obviously that makes sense in hindsight because of the twist. But I feel like a film has to make sense all the way through. For the twist to still work. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I kind of feel that they got to an end point and went, shit, what do we do? We'll do it's all a dream kind of thing. Because I mean, you could be like, okay, a few telltale signs, but like, what about the whole beginning sequence with the killer in the van? Like that's not explained.
Whose perspective is that? Because it doesn't make sense that it is from her, or it's her sort of, you know, I don't know whether it's psychosis or like, I do understand that she believes she's this person, but there are those entire scenes that kind of narratively don't quite work if she's not in the picture. And I do believe with a twist like that, you need to be able to go back and see the signs, as you say, but also it still needs to work as a complete story.
Yes.
And it kind of flips it on its head at the end. So I thought it was very odd. I was like, oh, wow, okay, No, I didn't think it needed it, actually. Sometimes simple is better. And it
absolutely,
can just be a film that is having a lot of fun with a lot of violence, and it's got a particularly minging killer. He's grim.
Oh, very grim. So what did you think about the treatment of mental health in this film as a theme, and especially when it comes to a queer character?
Yeah, it wasn't great, was it? It's not I don't know, it pictures Marie as, you know, because she clearly has some mental health problems, it pictures her as a mad psychotic stalker, like it's not a very good or sympathetic or nuanced kind of portrayal performance. I don't know if you would agree. I imagine you would agree.
Yeah, I feel a bit weird about it because obviously any list you look up online of, you know, greatest queer horror, they always list this film.
Do they?
Yes, it's in a lot of like queer horror lists, and I have such a beef about it because it kind of still plays on that monstrous queer. You know,
it does.
It's almost like, well, she has this mental health problem because she has feelings towards her same-sex friend, and because she's a lesbian, she's obviously crazy, and we'll put her in a mental home. And obviously in history, a lot of queer people were put into institutions because homosexuality was viewed as an illness. So I think it doesn't do that well. Whereas
I'm surprised. I'm kind of surprised that it made it into those lists, actually. I didn't know that. And you're completely right. It's got this sense of kind of like she's been driven insane by her own, you know, by her own feelings for this girl, and she's forcing them onto her friend as well. You know, she physically forces her to kiss her at the end. It's uncomfortable. Like it's not nice. It's kind of, you know, she's so obsessed with Alex, she's going to force her to be with her, whether she wants to or not. And it's I'm quite surprised.
There's another film, I'm gonna have to get up the title of it, that also has a queer killer in it. Hang on, let me get up the what am I looking for? Queer horror. And that does it very well, where the killer is a lesbian. No, it's not that one. And but it's not like that's the reason she's a killer. It's kind of like it's just part of the storyline that she just happens to be a queer woman, and she just happens to be married to a woman.
As all of the, you know, all of these kind of portrayals should be like. It doesn't have to be the central framing of the story, does it?
Exactly. Whereas I feel that High Tension's just a bit like what's it? Oh, What Keeps You Alive. There we go.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
So it just feels a bit like, has a bit of an ick factor for me personally.
I would completely agree. I hadn't thought about it as much when watching it, but when you brought it up, my gut instinct is that it isn't a very nice or a very interesting portrayal of queer characters or mental health. It's be interesting. I would be interested to hear a different perspective from someone who has put it into those lists. And like I'd love to hear an alternative view. Didn't work for me personally.
So would you recommend High Tension to horror fans?
If you like violence. Yes. I mean, I'm glad I watched it, and I did think it made almost a hilarious contrast to Hush. There was a bit at the beginning, actually, when Alex and Marie are in the car, and Alex turns the radio up really loudly, and Marie shouts, "We're not deaf." And I was like, I've just watched a film about a deaf mute person. This is so strange. They're kind of like, you're not deaf. She is. Great contrast. So I think it was a really interesting viewing experience because they are both, as you say, they're both home invasion films to an extent, but they do very different things, and I really liked that contrast. It hasn't persuaded me personally that I'm going to watch more extreme horror.
Okay,
but I think if you're into violent films, who are interested by violent films, definitely watch it. But if you feel like generally that's not your cup of tea, I don't think this is going to persuade you otherwise. I don't think this will be the film to persuade you.
Yeah, I kind of agree that it's for a very niche audience.
Yeah.
But if you're into your gore and your violence, and then sure, give it a watch.
I feel like it's been quite a polarizing film, hasn't it? In
yes.
terms of, and not actually because of the violence. I don't think that's the polarizing aspect. I think it is that strange twist ending that comes almost out of nowhere.
Yeah. So out of the two of them, if you had to choose one to recommend to someone who wanted a home invasion horror, which one would you recommend over the other?
I think I'd recommend Hush. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because I know that it's probably, it might not be your cup of tea, but I think it plays by some of the home invasion by numbers tropes, but also does something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Enough that I enjoy it quite a lot. How about you?
I think I'd go for Hush as well, just because it's probably an easier watch.
Yeah.
And I think with home invasion, a lot of the time it needs to be quite easy, and it doesn't need to be such a dirty watch as High Tension is, you know, that kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely wouldn't be my go-to for a home invasion film. No.
Yeah.
And again, it felt like more of a slasher as well. I was kind of like, it's a home invasion. It's also a slasher.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I'm really glad I watched it because, as I said, it's something that I would not have picked for myself. And it's always fun to do that. I think you have to do that now and again, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for suggesting it.
Oh, that's okay. I literally pulled, like, I have this cup of like subjects, and I literally just pulled them out the cup, and it's like all random. So
I love it.
Yeah, you just happen to get home invasion. So to round it up, what is your favorite horror?
My favorite horror ever. So I've always enjoyed Halloween. I mean, you can probably see on my t-shirt. I've always enjoyed John Carpenter's Halloween, but I spent a lot of time reading up on this film during lockdown, and I got really, really immersed in it. There's a really good podcast called Halloween Unmasked, which is on the Ringer network, which I wholeheartedly recommend because it talks about the history of and the making of Halloween, and also the fan culture around it today, which I absolutely love. So I really love John Carpenter's Halloween. I do really love The Shining. Right. It is the book that launched me into being a big Stephen King fan, and I love it as it's kind of a classic haunted house story that is equally also very much a psychological descent from addiction into madness. So I love that. And then one of my other go-to favorite films of the past 10 years actually is It Follows. Because I remember going into the cinema thinking, this is essentially a ghost STI. Like, this is going to be ridiculous and rubbish. And I just thought it was great. I just love the Disaster Piece soundtrack and the cinematography and everything. I just love that film. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's definitely on my, like, I watched it when it first came out, and I definitely keep meaning to watch it again because I really enjoyed it the first time.
It is so good. I just, it taps, and again, it generates, there's so much to talk about in terms of, fears of sex and the link between sex and horror and teenage boys and coming of age, that coming of age experience. I feel like that's just me to a T. I love anything like that. And
it was terrifying as well.
So scary having to watch out of the corner of your eye, like the framing of every shot, because you knew that something was going to start coming for you in slow motion in the corner of your eye. It's just so superbly done. Yeah,
it was always that peripheral kind of vision that you're like oh shit.
Something slow and out of focus, and then you end up fixating and being like, oh, there's something there, and it's actually just a person walking in the background down the street. Just brilliant. Love it.
Yes. Thank you so much for being a part of my home invasion
thank you. I had a brilliant time, and thank you for introducing me to a film that I never would have watched.
I don't know whether to say you're welcome or I'm sorry.
I think it's a bit of both.
It was a little bit of both.
A unique experience. I loved it. Thank you.
So if someone wants to find you on social media, where can they get you at?
I'm on Twitter at Steph McKenna. You will find me there.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that was my chat there with Steph McKenna about home invasion films. And in particular, we had a deep dive discussion about 2016's Hush, directed by Mike Flanagan. And also we discussed the French extremity film High Tension / Haute Tension, directed by Alexandre Aja or Aja. I don't know. I really should have looked that up. Anyway, I hope you really enjoyed this episode. I actually really wanted to have watched High Tension for quite a while now, so this gave me the perfect excuse. And, you know, I'm slowly getting into French extremity, or the new French extremity movement. So, yeah, this and Martyrs has been my nice little segue into French extremity. And hopefully there'll be more chances for me to explore that subgenre as well. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Let me know if there is a particular home invasion movie that you love and you feel that perhaps we should have covered that instead. What do you think about home invasions? Do you think they're as scary, or do you think they're kind of like meh? Let us know on our social media. So that is Instagram and Facebook at What a Scream Podcast. You can also find us on Twitter. That is at What_Scream. We are also on Patreon. So if you would like to support the podcast, head on over to our Patreon and you will find there different tiers of support, all within people's budgets, and there's lots of goodies and freebies and all that fun stuff. As always, I hope you are taking care. I hope you are really getting into the festival season at the moment for horror as well. It's a great couple of months for festivals, online and in person in a few countries as well. That's great. As always, I hope you're staying horrific. Goodbye.